Hello Commanders, how's it going? This is the Life Giver, and in today's video I'll be looking at the difference between the minimal, performance and high graphic settings in War Robots. Hey Commander, sorry for the interruption. I thought I'd just sort of explain why I've got the glasses and the wig. Basically I thought I'd go for the professor developer look, inspecting the graphics in War Robots. I hope you enjoy the look. Okay, so on screen, as you can see, what we have here is the minimal graphic setting. So, I mean, at first glance, it looks pretty cool, looks pretty normal, looks very good to be honest. But if you jump over to the performance setting, we can see a difference, and the biggest difference really is the shading. So if I go back to minimal, you can sort of see that, it looks pretty flat, but still very good. But the minute I switch over to performance, we're getting, I believe, shading in the game. So it looks really cool, lighting looks really nice, and you can see, certain details with the shell, the Orochi, with the Typhon there. You can see the details coming out a bit more. So if I go back to minimal, you can see, there you go, pretty flat textures, and then performance mode, a bit more details and a bit more shading. But what happens when we jump over to high level graphic settings? So let's have a quick look. So here we go. So what we have here is a highest graphic setting in War Robots. So the biggest thing really that I can tell is, if I look closer, is basically there's more details in the model. So if I switch back to performance, you can sort of see still looks very good, but then if I jump back into high, you can see there's a bit more detail. Now the question really is it worth having this graphic setting applied? So just by looking at the hanger, you can't really judge whether it's worth it or not. So let's have a quick look at some of the robots side by side. So we're going to look at my Loki here, the Typhon, the Orochi and the Dread Shell in a bit more detail. Okay, so in front of me I'm looking at three of the graphic settings. We've got the minimal on the far left, and in the middle we've got performance, and on the far right we have the high graphic setting. So you can blatantly tell from minimal there's not many details. So the model still looks pretty good, the texture still looks pretty good, looks really nice. But then when you jump into performance mode, there's a lot more detail. But then obviously if you go into, and again the question is like, is preference really, do you really need that high graphic setting? It's all subjective, so it's up to you. But let's look at the next model. So what we have here is a Typhon, and with this particular model you can tell there's a massive difference. So in the minimal, everything's very flat, it doesn't look very nice or appealing, but when you go to performance, it sort of brings the Typhon to life with this particular paint job. So you can see on the legs there's a bit more texture and a bit more specular, so a bit more shiny stuff, looks very metallic. But then obviously if you bump up the setting to high, as I've done there, it really brings that model to life. It looks a bit more realistic. So in all honesty, I think the performance is it's like a nice balance between the two. If your device can run high but in sort of low frames per second. So let's look at the Megalodon Orochi. So again, minimal doesn't look too bad, the texture isn't too bad in the minimal setting, and then when you jump into performance there's a bit more detail, and again finally into the high setting it sort of brings it to life. So one thing to note is if you look at the sort of tires on the Orochi, you can see in the minimal graphics setting you can't really see the tread marks, but sorry, you can't really see the tread, but if you look at the performance and high graphic setting, you can really see the details come to life. So in high it definitely looks much better, and if you look at the teeth for the Orochi, you can sort of tell it's sort of bringing out the details. I suppose that's a bit more lighting, a bit more shading. So generally speaking, it does look better in my opinion. And we have the Dread Shell here, and again, it's so obvious that the minimal is minimal. It's not bad, it doesn't look crap to be fair. And then you've got performance, and then the best setting, which is high. The question really is, what's your preference and can you run it? So most of the devices that are going to be able to access the high graphic setting are going to be the sort of newer and high-end devices, but I believe Pixonic are updating this list. So what I'll do is, if I can find a link to the supported devices, I'll post it in the description. So have a look at the description either way, I will let you know if I was able to obtain that list or not. But finally, let's look at the alpha. So same thing really, you know, minimal isn't too bad, performance a bit more details, and on high there's a lot more detail on the alpha. So, you know, so you can literally tell with the shield, there's a bit more detail in the shield, a bit on the body and the legs. So it all comes down to personal preference. So me personally, as I've been playing, I have seen a difference in like the gameplay in high. But what I've noticed is that my iPad, which is the iPad M1, the iPad Pro M1, it does run a little bit hotter, but I don't know whether that's a sort of placebo effect, thinking, you know, because it's a high setting, it's going to consume more power. But bear in mind, guys, if you run at 60 FPS, which hopefully you guys can do, that will consume a lot more power. So I've got some clips here of me running around the factory map with the Loki on solo mode. So you can see I'm sort of got minimal there, and now I'm panning between performance and minimal. So you can tell the difference massively in the shading, and the textures are of higher detail in performance mode. So it looks very nice in performance, to be honest. And minimal, there's a lot less shading, so everything looks a lot brighter. You can probably see stuff easily. So here we can see going around the corner, these sort of tanker things there, you can tell the difference. And now I've jumped into high mode, so you can blatantly tell that there's a massive difference in the actual graphic quality between minimal performance and high, although very subtle between performance and high in my opinion. So the question really is it worth the performance between performance and high? And I'd probably say no, because the main thing really is the shading. So the shading makes the biggest difference in the game, as you can see. So this is high, looks very nice, lots of details. You can see the textures popping with the grass there, a bit more detail, and the Loki also looks a bit cooler. And so this is like a 360. And now we have basically 3 bars of minimal performance and high. I sort of chop and change, so just keep an eye out for me swapping the order of the performance, minimum and high setting. So as you can see, there is a big difference between high and minimal, but between performance and high, it's very subtle. It's, you know, it sort of looks darker, and and I think the textures look a lot more detailed. It definitely looks nicer, in my opinion. But is it a deal breaker if you can't access high? I'd say no. If you can run performance, generally performance looks really good compared to minimal. So if you can run performance over minimal, I would definitely recommend running performance over minimal. But if you want the best graphics settings, obviously go for high. But bear in mind, it might have a performance hit on your device. On my M1 iPad Pro here, I didn't really notice a huge drop in FPS, but at some point I'm going to try to capture the frames in the game. So there will be another video coming out with me basically capturing the frames and whether there is a frame drop or not. So here we have side by side, just to make it a bit more easier for you guys to see the difference between the different modes. And you know, like I said, I think performance is a nice balance. You're getting the nice shading there, a bit more detail in the models and the textures. Looks really good. Definitely better than the minimal setting there. It just sort of adds to the game, right? It just makes it look better, a bit more realistic. But obviously, if you want the best graphics, you know, you sort of saw there that the high graphics setting will give you the most appealing visuals. So yeah, so that was it, guys. Just a very short comparison, a quick look at between the different minimal performance and high graphics settings. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell icon. And like I said, I will be posting a video soon where I'm trying to capture the frames per second on my device, and to figure out whether going between the different performance modes on the iPad M1 has an impact on the frames per second, which can be vital when you're in the heat of the battle. But that was it, guys. I will catch you soon. Okay, bye.